Welcome back to the Can I Ask You a Question podcast. Thank you for joining me again for another week. Just have one ask for you and one offer to add some more value. The ask is this: would you rate and review this podcast wherever you're watching or listening? If it's adding value to you, then it's a great way you can just give back a little bit and help us grow the reach of this podcast. And one offer: I want to be spending more time with you than just twice a month on this podcast, adding more value in your life. And so every week I send out a newsletter called The Wise Letter. The focus is on helping you grow healthier, wealthier, and wiser. I imagine you'd like to grow in all three. And so you can go to thewiseletter.com, or there's a link wherever you're watching or listening, and subscribe today to get that free weekly newsletter sent out every Thursday. And with that, I'm excited to jump into today's conversation. It's with Thomas Petersen of Evers Ridge Farm. It's a cool new farm in the area where I live, pursuing a more holistic and sustainable approach to farming. And in this conversation, we dive into all kinds of stuff, some of the science of farming and permaculture, also just living a sustainable life. In the description, I say it's kind of one part farming and one part poetry. It's a really cool conversation happening on location at Thomas's and his wife Hannah's farm. With that, let's jump into today's conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Can I Ask You a Question podcast, and we are outside today on location at Evers Ridge Farm, and I'm with my new friend Thomas. We're sitting outside drinking tea, and we're going to just jump right in with what I think is going to be a great podcast conversation. A couple of weeks ago, Allie and I brought our daughter Winnie to this cool farm that we're at right now that had a pumpkin patch and a cool play opportunities for kids. I think for the first time I played in a giant vat of dried corn.
Oh, yeah.
Which is actually amazing. Cleaner than sand, but I kept finding corn different places.
Tactile and just what you need. Therapeutic.
I loved it. So we were here and we were walking around the farm, and we learned that this young couple were running it, both in their, I think, late 20s, early 30s. And I was intrigued, and I got to talk with Thomas while drinking some fresh pressed apple cider from a press that's like
150, almost exactly.
Years old.
Yeah.
So I was impressed by that vintage, and it was delicious. And I asked him if he could come on the show and share some of his hard-earned wisdom and experiences from this project of starting an entire farm. I look forward to getting to know Thomas some more alongside you guys on the podcast. And I think for anybody interested in, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong later, sustainable farming, or has a crazy dream to start a business or a project of their own, I'm going to invite you to listen, join my guest today, and together let's learn from his wisdom and apply it in our own lives. We just get healthy, wealthy, wiser.
Oh, my.
And so a lot of pressure.
You're puffing me up a lot.
We expect to be 10 pounds lighter, 10K richer, and IQ higher after this conversation. So
love it.
No pressure. Okay, we're going to jump right in. Why does the world need more farms like the one that you and your wife, Hannah, right?
Yeah.
You and your wife, Hannah, are nurturing and are creating here at Evers Ridge Farm? Why does the world need more of those?
Man, just throw me a big one right off the bat. So I think the whole conversation or concept of like farming, it all has to be taken with a grain of salt. And there's so many different filters that everyone walks into a conversation about farming with, and beliefs and assumptions. So, whatever I say here and whatever Hannah and I really are doing right now is like, has to be taken with a grain of salt, and with the caveat that we are new to farming.
Yeah.
And we don't have all the answers. We haven't broken farming open and figured out the best way to do it. But we are in a position of doing a lot of experiments and seeing some success in some areas that we're really happy with. So with that caveat, I think, I'll throw some numbers out and you have to fact check me on those.
Yeah.
But something like, I want to say 40% of the U.S. population was like a farmer back 150 years ago when that cider press was made. And now it's like something like, it's like less than 5 or 2%.
Yeah.
And that's not those aren't exact numbers. That's the ballpark. There were a lot of farmers, and a lot of farming was by necessity, right? You farmed because you had to survive. It was more of a, and this is the way that Hannah and I are looking at farming is taking like, okay, where has it been and where's it going? And so we're looking back where it's been. There's a huge shift away from like the necessity of farming of like we need to farm to survive, and turned into like convenience farming or like capitalistic commercialized farming. And it's like farming used to be kind of looked down upon, I think, a lot back in, well, golly, I mean, up to even maybe the 70s. It was seen as like a lowly type of living.
You weren't necessarily educated,
No,
which
yeah.
isn't true, or
Right. And I think that a lot of people got out of farming because that was what mom and pop wanted. No, don't be a farmer. Go to college, go to learn, and or it was get stuck with the farm. And I think, boy, the way my wife and I were looking at the way things have been going the last 20 years. I'm 29 and she's 26. We're like, golly, like the food quality is just so up in the air. People can't trust things anymore. You don't know what's in your food anymore. You don't.
Yep.
There's been, I think, a little bit of a resurgence of people coming back to farming because they want to be connected to what they're eating for a health benefit reason. And it's funny, it's almost turned into like a privileged situation to be able to hobby farm, and I think that's also not ideal. So, like, what answer the question? Why do we need more farms? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Why do we
farms maybe of this size? And we'll get a lot more into it, but of the strategy, why do we need more of that? And we'll break it down different ways, because you already started to unpack a little bit. Okay, there's different ways to go about it. There's different problems. Sounds like you said something interesting already to me, which was, okay, sounds like there's a guy named Ray Dalio in his book Principles, and he'll just go back through trends over 100 years to help predict the trend lines of the future. And so, like during COVID, he had done that and gone through different pandemics like the Spanish flu and different things, and helped him see patterns that might repeat. You're saying you guys have been looking at patterns of farming for, okay, well, how's it been, and now where's it going? Mm-hmm. And you feel like, for some reason, you're feeling like this is the right step for the next.
Well, and
years.
For us particularly,
yeah,
we got into farming primarily because we wanted to have a land to raise kids on, and like what kind of environment would be best for us to raise kids on. Yep. And we thought, well, what better than like a farm where you can have so many opportunities to learn so many tactile things. And being in the privileged position that we're in, boy, it's a crazy story. I was logging for a guy in the valley here named Don Hammond, and I was running choker cables for a summer, and it's the hardest work I've ever done in my life.
What's a choker cable?
So a choker cable is when you drop a log on a hillside, you have to run a cable down from the big machine that's going to pull the log up.
Yep.
You run a cable down, and a choker is the little flexible cable you tie around the tree, and then it cinches it down, and the tension pulls the log up the hill. And boy, those guys work hard. It was nuts. But this guy I worked for, Don Hammond, one of the most brilliant men I've ever met. The way he would probably just call himself a logger, but he's really like a forest ecologist. Yeah. And he sees water and slope and hills and trees as a big functioning system. And I was, an angsty 22-year-old, and was like, I don't know what I do. The problems with the world. I'm so frustrated. Food and trees, and this is all messed up. And he was like, you really ought to read this book called Restoration Agriculture by a fellow named Mark Shepard. And he's farming in Wisconsin. And the book just changed our minds crazily in a wild sort of way. It took me from thinking about farming as like a necessary piece of society to like farming can be a huge source of building actual building health in a system to create extra. And if you think about like, there's a theme that we'll come back to later about like creating extra, but
Yeah.
it was this wild concept of like, I just assumed the soil had a certain amount of goodness in it, and you grew plants on it, and you took, and then sometimes you maybe put compost down or whatever to re-enrich it, and that was it. But there's this like wild concept of farming called permaculture. I don't know if have you heard of permaculture before?
Just the phrase, but
Just the
enlighten
phrase,
me,
yeah.
enlighten all of us.
Oh, well, okay. The crash course. There's a fellow in the Valley, well, actually out in Williams, named Don Tipping, who we also take a lot of notes from. But Mark Shepard in Wisconsin, in this book, Restoration Agriculture, they talk about permaculture in a way of creating farming systems that are permanent. So it's permanent agriculture,
Yep.
Permaculture, that's all it means. And the whole idea revolves around planting trees, shrubs, bushes, and annual crops, like vegetable crops, in layers on land.
Yep.
So the whole idea revolves around doing things kind of like a lot of work at the beginning, and then doing less work over time and just maintaining and harvesting.
Yep.
And that's the difference between like an annual crop and a perennial crop. Perennial means that every year it reproduces, and annual means every year it produces once, and then it goes to seed. You can save the seeds and replant them, like a wheat, or like most vegetables are annuals. And perennials would be like a tree, or a berry bush, right, where it produces every year without any soil amendments or anything like that.
So it takes root, it lives consistently all year round, but then it has a season of blossoming and producing fruit.
So permaculture leans into that principle heavily, and also into biodiversity, doing multiple species on one piece of land, a lot of different species, to create immune system health. And you think about like your gut or my gut, we have like an immune system in our bodies.
Yep.
And if you just eat one thing, or very basic types of food over and over and over again, you end up weakening your immune system if you don't get a lot of different nutrients, if you don't have diversity of bacteria in your gut.
Yep.
It's the same principle on the land. This permaculture idea is like, let's get 5 or 6 or 10 different types of fruit trees on this spot instead of one, because then if we have a disease that comes through, we're going to be way more resistant with different trees that provide different immune system functions in a whole orchard, instead of one type of tree that might be susceptible to a pest or disease that could wipe out all of the trees. Probably not all the trees, but most of the trees. And reading this book was just crazy for us, because we're like, wow, I could create a farm system that might not be as profitable up front, but is going to create health on the landscape that's going to make extra and have opportunity to grow even more and longer term.
Yep.
Not to mention numerous benefits of not tilling the soil every year. There's like an absurd amount of atmospheric carbon dioxide that gets released
Yep.
from soil whenever it's tilled. It is trapped carbon in the earth. When you turn it over, it releases that carbon. Which is why agriculture is like the number 2 biggest contributor to global warming or whatever. Then
My friend has turned me on to an interesting documentary, and I'm not sure global warming exists,
sure,
but there's a documentary, I think it was called Love the Earth.
yeah, or Kiss the Earth or
Kiss
something.
the Earth.
Yeah,
That was the first time I was introduced to, all I've ever heard of anyone that, because I'm kind of like, well, if there is a problem, okay, how might we approach it in a way that doesn't destroy economies, livelihoods, liberties?
yeah,
And that was the first time in that documentary where I'd ever heard anyone present an option that would actually proactively basically vacuum up or reduce carbon levels versus just slowing emissions.
Yeah.
And they talked about that their theory, or they posited, according to their evidence, that, like, just like you're saying, it's based in that documentary, that if you don't till as much and some of that, and have healthy ground cover, and that it draws more rain.
yeah.
It sucks the carbon out of the air, I think, is a simplistic way of saying it.
It does. It's a wild concept. I haven't seen the documentary, but is Woody Allen in that thing?
He's the voice.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but I need to.
Or Woody Harrelson.
Harrelson. Thank you.
Yeah, Woody Harrelson.
Thank you. It's a wild concept, but like, you have to tell me, you have to redirect us if you want us to go a different direction in this conversation, because I'll just go on to something. But
yeah, I think to guide us slightly, because I want to, as everyone listening, I want to get to know Thomas for all of us a little bit. I want to, for those watching more for the business and entrepreneurial side, I want you to be inspired by someone that's actually doing it. And then at the same time, I want to nerd out about the science of farming a little bit. And for me, it's, I love to draw, I can already draw like a bunch of wisdom from how the principles that you're describing in nature might apply to our personal lives, to our bodies, as we already talked about, which I think is kind of fascinating.
I'll make a note. We'll come back to that later.
Yeah, let's do it. So let me ask you the next question.
Sure.
Just get a little bit about you. 90 seconds to the top of the elevator. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. You already got a little bit. You were logging.
Yes.
You were young.
Yes.
Kind of what's the Thomas, and bring your wife into that story as much as you want, because you're partnering in
Would
this.
love to. So my wife is I would say an artist at heart. She's makes ceramics. She made this mug.
Oh, cool.
She is a crafter. She's a painter. She's a drawer. I'm a woodworker as well, and we both had some studios, and we're doing artistic creative outlets on her sister's land just down the road. And even before we got married, and then we got married, and then we're talking more intensely about, hey, what do we want to do with our lives? What's the direction we want to go?
Yeah.
This is gonna be more than 90 seconds.
That's good.
And that turned into like, if we want to have kids, we want to have a lot of kids. What kind of environment do we want to raise them in? A farm is like the perfect place.
Yep.
What kind of landscape? What do we want to do on a farm? We thought that we were going to do like house remodel stuff and flip houses for years before we got into farming. And my wife likes to look at property data website stuff on Jackson County. If you look at it, you can see who owns what land and stuff. And it's not stuff that's for sale. It's just land. And she found this piece of land. It's 106 acres. And she was like, wow, that's a cool piece of land. I love where it is. I wonder if they'd ever want to sell it one day.
So she just, and I've actually been learning about that, and I'd like to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I know there's a paid website where you can do the.
There's a free website, yeah.
But there's a free one too.
Yeah. If you just go to Jackson County data.
And that's like, like the property records.
Data.
And she was looking at plots.
Yes.
Clicks on it and somehow got the actual contact information.
No.
Okay, so
just saw, oh, it's cool. It's owned by a trust or whatever. And then I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, it goes on the market.
Really?
Yeah. Because she also looks at the market all the time. And it's like, wow, it's for sale. It's over $1 million. I wonder if we could ever own that. I'm like, honey, we have no assets. We have no, like, we're newly married, and we were just doing house remodel stuff for her mom. And it was wild because she after some months of persuading me, she was like, hey, we should go look at that property. Let's go reach out to the realtor. And like a couple of Dumbos we did. And this guy is driving us out around here on his Gator, and he's asking us silly questions like, so what's your lending opportunity with this? What's your financial plan? I'm like, I don't know.
To make a plan.
We don't have any money. I didn't tell him that, but we drove around and looked at it and kind of started to fall in love with it, and thinking about, that's way more than we were planning. We were planning 10 acres.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is more achievable for most people. And so we kind of put that on the burner. Like, okay, that's a crazy big piece of land, big project, 30-year dream. Right. And then it was 6 months later, it sat on the market untouched. And her mom came to us and said, hey, I'm selling the house that we had in Sisters, like the family house, and I'm going to get a lot more money than I thought for it. Do you have any ideas for where to invest money? And we were like, okay, how about some land?
Yeah.
And then got her involved with this conversation. And that's really turned into like, boy, it was another 6 months later of looking at it, deciding if she could sell that property and then transfer that money into this piece of land.
Did she do that just by nerding out a little bit?
Yeah.
That 1049 or whatever it is, tax exchange, like from a business to.
Yeah.
So she's able to, or if so the capital gains or whatever.
Exactly. So then she could hold the asset and just basically transfer it over
to this.
Maintain ownership of this, and then we started the farm LLC, and like she's allowing us to do the farm while she carries the ownership of the land.
Yeah.
Which is not most people's situation. So right there at the top, that's like a huge step up that we've been given.
Yeah.
And purely just like a family legacy inheritance situation.
Yeah.
So from like the advice that I'm going to have personally for other people wanting to get into farming is going to be limited to like people with more of a passion than people with like, how do you like financially turn a farm into a profit cow quickly? That's not going to be advice that I'm going to even know anything about. What I'm going to know about is how to like create tools to help people have more access to farming like this. And that's really what we turned it into, is like, okay, if we're going to do this scale, then we're going to have to go more the route of like making avenues for other hobby farmers to have access to data, to experimentation, to trees, to seeds, to compost, to worms, to animals affordably, to then be able to jumpstart their dream. So then if they do happen to get a mortgage and a piece of land, what we didn't have and what we're trying to create now is access to help, advice, the blueprints. Here's what we did. Here's the experiments. Here's, cheap worms, cheap trees, cheap seeds, that kind of thing.
Maybe a silly question, but why do you feel the need to give back to the next up farmers? Might be 2 years from you, 5 years from you. What's that motivation coming from?
A couple of different reasons. That's a great question. I think one, because I feel like I wouldn't say I owe it to people. Maybe I do. I don't know. It feels like we've been given an inheritance.
Yeah.
And the best thing we could do with that to build community and community health would be to help other people have as much opportunity as they can through the gift we've been given.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like if you have a talent for any particular thing in the world, you can totally go your own route and like make money at it and get your business going, but you're going to like have I think a better, richer time if you expand it out and like allow and help some other people.
I love it.
With your gift. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And like the other half is we feel super led by God to like, hey, like this is a gift you've been given. Now part of that is to like help other people too. And I think there's also a principle in when you help someone do something, you learn way more yourself than if you just stay in your own lane all the time and like, oh, we won't invite anyone else into this until we have a perfect system.
Yep.
Our system's going to get better the more people we bring in and help and get input and get feedback. And even like doing this podcast, I'm like, well, why not? Why not share some more ideas? And that's going to help me galvanize how to communicate better and how to like share input with people better,
I love it. Well, I appreciate you doing that for everybody, and I'm a 100% believer in that. So I think it's amazing. We're talking about the story, and a pretty fascinating story how it started, led up to here. How long ago was that? Was that about? Did see the land to now? Is that 3 years ago or about or?
Yeah, I suppose it is. It was. We closed in the land September 2 years ago, and then moved out January a year ago. Or I guess it was 2 years. Yeah, this January will be 2 years.
Interesting.
We didn't start. It was crazy though. Again, if you can afford to, I would tell anybody who's getting into any kind of farming on this type of farming that's like longer term, less annual crop, more like multifaceted system with animals and trees and compost. I would highly recommend taking as much time as you can afford to at the beginning to don't touch a thing on the land. Move out onto the land and spend as much time as you possibly can walking around and paying attention at different seasons of the year and different times of the day, right? Because if you came out and you decided, oh, I want to put these types of trees out here because I like that fruit, and I want to build my rows in this spot because I like that spot, you will miss out massively on the way the whole ecosystem is already functioning.
Like where the sun is, where it's more windy.
Where there's wet spots, different soil types, different wind spots. There's all kinds of different things to consider. And you will miss so much of it if you just decide, I want this type of thing to go in here. Pay attention. really, and walk around and listen to the landscape, because it's talking all the time. There's so much communication happening with the land. And if you just like slow down a little bit and try to pay attention, not everyone can afford to do that, and I understand that. But as much as you can afford to, we made a mistake by experimenting with they're called swales. Have you heard of swales before? It's just a berm cut in the land. It's like you turn the earth over on a certain slope,
Okay.
to funnel water a certain direction,
Okay.
or to catch water. And we made a mistake in this field behind me. Is we cut all the rows, and we're experimenting. And we're like, oh, let's just try it out. Let's just go this way. And we cut the rows to all be on a 1% slope. That's 1 foot drop for every 100 feet length. 1% slope towards the road. So we funneled all the water up. What we thought was uphill ended up being like we funnel all the water towards the road, which already collects water, and that funnels water straight off towards the creek.
Yeah.
And so like any extra massive rain event we get, we've like, oh crap, we kind of funneled all of our water the wrong direction.
Instead of it sitting in the soil.
So what we should have done was done level sills everywhere, so that any water that's caught isn't run anywhere. It's just sitting and soaking in. So like just that alone is if we just like taken a little bit more time
Yeah, absolutely.
to consider that.
Already, there's just like a lot of applications, like we were saying, I could see in different crafts in life. One being, take the time to really, measure twice, cut once.
Totally. And like give something a voice that you, man, who said that? I want to say it was, have you done any Richard Rohr reading?
I know Richard Rohr from but I haven't read his books directly.
Okay. He's got some dynamite books. The Art of Letting Go is a great one to start with. But I think it was him. He talks about giving something, particularly in nature, a voice. And that goes even back to like St. Francis. And like a lot of the principles that he established was like giving nature a voice to be able to like listen differently. There's a book called The Hidden Life of Trees. Have you heard of that book before? It's just talking about how...
Just the name, I think.
Yeah, okay. How trees in a forest work, and the way they communicate with each other is crazy. And so there's just a lot more going on than we typically understand, especially as like a farmer. You're thinking like, oh, how do I get the most out of this land? The whole conversation for us has turned into, well, how do I give this land as much richness as I can so that it's super, super fertile, so that wherever there is something growing is really, really healthy and lush, and it's working with what's already here, not working to change what's already here.
Yeah. One of the things I'm picking up from what you're saying, you can let me know if I'm hearing it right, is that there was a human personal reason for getting into farming, doing the farm. You're saying, hey, how our kids are going to be raised, how their soul, mind, body, spirit, all that, emotions. This is going to be a good atmosphere that will help them. And it sounds like I'm guessing, you didn't quite say it, at the pace of the work and the hours and being able to do it with your spouse. Was there a lot of reasons that don't necessarily have to do with what nut tree you're producing, but just getting out here so that was that a big part of it?
Absolutely. And I think I came from a lineage of farmers. Well, I know I did. And so I think it's in me a little bit.
Yep. But
further, I hated farming growing up. I hated it. We had a little hobby farm and a garden and cows and chickens and stuff, and I hated the work. I thought my parents were dumb for doing it. I'm like, this is the worst use of time ever. And as I've gotten older, as I've turned into an adult, I've realized that there's few things in life that are super, super rich, all-encompassingly, and and nature is one of them. That is so rich everywhere you look. And I didn't know that farming could work with nature so intimately, but they're so intertwined. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge personal reason. And then for me and my wife both, we're realizing like we have a huge desire to see like community health grow and to like know our neighbors really well and to have them be a part of the farm. And that's another reason to do farming in this way at all, is because we want to have as many avenues for people to interact with food and with farming.
That's
and
good.
to be able to have conversations exactly like this, of like, hey, like what is going on here besides the thing we're producing and selling?
And I think that's probably one of the things that I think my wife and I, when we came out here, I think we could feel that. Is you just, you can tell the difference between people that are just, I happen to love a nice McDonald's cheeseburger, but you can tell the difference between a McDonald's cheeseburger and a really home cooked meal.
Totally.
And one's cutting corners, one's utilitarian, one's rushing, and the other one. And I think a big sign is when they do something they didn't have to do, or do something that isn't necessarily going to pay a bunch back.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, you're doing this because you like it.
Yeah.
Or you're doing this extra thing because there's a passion to it.
You bring up a good point, which is affection. Like, is there affection in what you're doing? And that's a Wendell Berry quote, is like, as long as there's affection with your connection to the land, it will totally come out with health.
Yeah.
And like, but you also bring a good point up of like the McDonald's burger versus the home cooked meal. And that's a huge point of tension that we're walking into with farming at all, is this tension between convenience and health. And everyone wants both, and you can't always have both. And like asking someone to do something inconvenient, like driving out to a farm stand to buy eggs versus just picking them up at the grocery store with everything else, is a really, really big ask. So one of the things we're wanting to establish and figure out is, how do we invite people to do something that might be better, but is harder to do?
Yeah. There's I just re-signed up for the Seth Godin daily email. He's a thoughtful marketer, but he's really kind of a philosopher.
Fun.
And one of his newest posts talked about how, I think it was him, and he was either quoting someone else or he coined it himself, and just said, basically, he who tells the best story owns their corner of the world. And the idea is, if you can stir up passion, but that's the ticket, right? That's the thing, is getting people to see what you see, to see the value that you see,
and sacrifice. It's so hard. Like I can't reasonably ask like a single mom on a really tight schedule and a really tight budget to go out of her way to do something that might have a better food value for her kids, but is like gonna cripple her time wise.
Yep.
So like, yeah, we can't fight every battle like that. So like, what can we reasonably ask people to do and show them, hey, here's why this is important and good.
Yeah. we are bouncing all over the place a little bit, but that's okay. That's kind of the nature of the podcast. There was this conservative like TV show and station or whatever, and basically they were whether you're liberal or conservative doesn't so much matter, but they were protesting these the razor companies, and they didn't like their politics, so they made their own. And that the conservative podcast and show would traditionally, you'd think, okay, so you're going to make it in America. That would be a very that would be the next step of your ideals. But they just explained, hey, we can't do all of the ideals at once, so we're going to make this in China, because that's the only way we can sell it for the rate that's even competitive to this company that we philosophically disagree with and think you should buy our razors. Now they say it now from this company that hates your guts. And it was interesting. It kind of gave me permission to go, I mean, these are like about as idealistic a guys as it gets. These are guys that scream for ideals but they're acknowledging and they're saying, hey, there's where we're going, and we'll bring it to the States when we reach $1 billion in sales or whatever in that company in that number. But we're not going to not do the first good step because we can't do the second. Yeah,
that's a good point.
And that's been liberating to me is, hey, because I think what we both seem to share a value of is holistically healthy ecosystems, whether that be life or ground or body. It's like, why are we introducing these things that are destroying the loop of vitality? But sometimes I think I've been paralyzed by not starting with the first good step because I couldn't do the other ones.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I won't eat healthy. Like, I just got some more research on how much protein I'm supposed to be eating. And I'm like, I've not yet found a way to afford 150 grams of protein a day.
Seriously.
And so it's like, well, am I going to not do what I can do? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be...
Start growing crickets, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be kind of something like that. And so I'm eating a lot of eggs and things, but I'm going to start where I can start. Man, there was something we were talking about a couple steps back. I can't remember. So let's keep chugging through, and then we'll hopefully loop back on some of these things. This is kind of off topic, fun one. What's one purchase of any price that has really improved your daily life? Could be a subscription, a supplement. You've already given us some good book recommendations, so it could be that.
A purchase that's really made daily life better.
Yep.
Boy. So the nature of my work is outdoors, right? So really having, okay, my wife is going to roll her eyes at me, but like having like a nice pair of shoes, like a good pair of shoes that you're comfortable with, that work well.
Yep.
In so many different facets, and like you're comfortable in all day, makes such a difference for me. Like, and I talk with my buddy Ben about this a lot. Like, buying a quality clothing item is like really annoying world to be in, but like if you get like a quality pair of shoes, and that's like $200 or over,
Yeah,
that's like, it's so frustrating to do it. But like once you find the right brand that works for you, and like, I found a pair of shoes that is comfortable and works well, like my feet aren't sore anymore at the end of the day, and I'm like willing to batter them and not worry about it, and like treat them really rough. Like being comfortable at work.
Yeah.
And my shoes is like number one for me.
I like it. A lot of times I will, and sometimes this doesn't always work, but a lot of times I'll look at value based on, okay, money or divided by, or it might be mixing the math up, divided by the amount of time I enjoy it.
Yeah, totally.
So a movie, and I like to go to the movies, but I end up spending $15 with popcorn and a ticket, or $20 for 2.5 hours, versus $20 for a book that's 10 hours, and which makes sense. And I do both.
Yeah.
But I generally go, okay, the best bang for the buck is the 10 hours of enjoyment for the same. So, but if I take that and I go, okay, you're in them 8 hours a day. So this might help with Hannah a little bit, is you're in them 8 hours a day.
She's not going to roll her eyes because of cost. She rolls her eyes because because I'm talking about shoes.
Because that's
because that's my little comfort.
Your shoe passion.
But it isn't like, if you think about like a pair of shoes,
I'm just saying you're getting good value.
If you pay $60 for a, let's say, subpar pair of shoes, they're gonna at me at work out here will last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Right. If I buy a quality pair of shoes for $250, that's gonna last me 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I just do the math.
Right there, it still comes out better, and I get better pair of shoes, and I support a company that I like,
and
are doing something good and
all the time.
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, another question, kind of just getting into you a little bit. What's your morning routine look like, especially with taking care of the farm? Is it consistent? Is it ever changing? And it's been interesting as we've been asking this question to different people. Wake up, bedtime, coffee or tea, workout or don't, spiritual practices, yoga from the trees, whatever.
Okay, a lot of grace for myself, I think, is the number one. Because every day it feels like a struggle to get out of bed most days, where it's not like a depression or sad or I'm too tired thing. We sleep a lot these days, like a lot, like 9 to 10 hours a night, which we have no kids. Nice. So we're gonna do that until we have the kids. But it's like every day is drag myself out of bed, and definitely coffee every day. Partially for the caffeine, mostly for the flavor. It's just a ritual. It's like I grind my own beans. I don't weigh my water or get the perfect temperature, but I do grind the beans. Yep. Occasional push-ups. I'm trying to get into a rhythm of doing like 50, 60, 70 every day.
That's great.
In the morning. But most often, didn't get to it. We're up later. Oh well. Like, I got to be enough. My best has got to be enough. And so that ends up being the conversation inside. It's like, not quite what I wanted. You know what, though? I think my best is enough, and I'm doing my best.
You let yourself accept that. And
yes.
Say, okay, I'm not gonna beat myself
up. Because there's there's a perfect ritual, and some people are so good at it, and I admire those people. Do you Enneagram?
Yeah.
At all? Okay, yeah. Like the threes of the world, like they're super on it.
Performers.
And I'm so proud of them. I am so just like getting by and so happy with that.
What's your Enneagram number? Do you know?
1.
So you are kind of a perfectionist.
Totally. That's why it's always that you're never quite good enough conversation with myself in the morning, and then always like you know what? My best is enough for Jesus, and so it's enough for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's enough. And then a lot of failure, I think, like, which again is partly the number thing, partly just insecurity, like want to be somewhere that I'm just like can't ever feel like I'm quite there. And so I think I end up having just a lot of the same conversation over and over, and it's a good, necessary, needed journey for me to have that conversation, because it's like, okay, confront the self-doubt, confront the like disappointed in myself. Okay, then go through the cycle of, oh, well, I'm going to blame on someone else. Oh, it's my wife's fault. She's the reason why, like, I'm feeling upset. Or then I go through, oh, it's my life circumstance, and it's like because we're not living in our house yet, or we're in a trailer still, and oh, it's not that. It comes back to me. I'm like, well, am I really enough? Am I letting myself be enough? And that always comes back to it's a good question. And like some days I'm really good at it. I'm really good at just letting go and being like, oh, Jesus, am I enough? Yeah. Okay, fine. Fantastic. Then I can let go and just be enough. And some days I don't get there, and it's really a sucky, frustrating day.
I gotcha.
But a lot of that.
Even today for me, I had a lot of the same things. We'll call those, one things my wife and I will call them, with our students in the internship that we lead is, and from books we've read, is like a limiting belief. Is this, okay, this is a limit, this belief you have, it's limiting you, it's undercutting your success, and as a Christian, it's not aligning to God's view of you, but I had battle those limiting beliefs, battle those things, and so I know today my brain just got stuck on some future planning, and I needed there's a lot of things with the podcast I needed to do today, and I just spent, Allie doesn't know this, but hours on this other thing. Yeah. And as literally, but one of the things I've learned that's helped me is to actually, when I can do it, is to literally out loud talk to myself and summarize what went good, what went bad, and then turn, like, and turn it off. Yeah. So I didn't get it turned off till right. It was thankfully that I had to wait for at the school.
All those parents, yeah.
Yeah, because it wasn't until right about the turn on to here that I was able to finally shift from everything else I was doing, and I'd already prepared for questions and kind of be like, okay, that's all done. Now I need to be here. But I've found that helpful. I'll do it with Allie too sometimes, is we'll just out loud, I'll just be like, okay, is that true? Is that not true? I was never diagnosed, but I've dealt with a lot of true obsessive compulsive stuff. Habits, yeah. Yeah. And that's so much better by the grace of God and work. But I've learned to talk with Alec. Hey, is that worry realistic? No, it's like a 1 in a million chance that's going to happen. Or no, you don't have to feel so bad about yourself. Whatever, and just categorically, like
forced verbal processing.
Yeah, and just kind of put that in the box. Kill that. Don't ever bring that back out or whatever, and then get back to what you're actually supposed to be focusing on. Yeah. You probably have a lot of time to think out here working the farm.
Yeah. Yeah. And occasionally I'm so proud of myself and happy and fuller and richer when I do get a chance to meditate. Like that's my jam. A little quiet time in the morning. Just like, and again, Richard Rohr has a lot of really good content. But one of the things he recommends is like take a word, any word that you feel led to have, and just repeat it. And then come back to it and then spend like 10 minutes in total silence wherever you can get quiet, music or not. And then as soon as your mind starts to wander away and start to think about anything, just bring it back to that word for 10 minutes and then stay there. And like the way you can come out of yourself a little bit and start to then look at yourself objectively by that practice is phenomenal. Like that's, I guess, how I get to the place of sometimes of being like, oh, I'm okay. I'm doing enough. Like I'm so proud of myself, actually.
Is the word supposed to be prompted by God? Is the word supposed to be
matter.
Just could it be the word penguin, or like does the word matter? And is it supposed to be something that's going on in your life?
Like typically it's a phrase or like a word of like totally prompted by God. It could be penguin, it doesn't matter. Whatever helps, whatever feels like it's going to be a centering word.
You're thinking about that.
Yeah, like the other day it was for me. It was like it was just the word silence, and it was like not really like a profound reason for that word, but more like I'm craving silence. Let me just like do a thing, and 10 minutes of like silence, and then you almost like go into the word even. And so if it's like a scripture thing, it's great. If it's a listening thing, it's great. If it's writing some stuff down and having those prompts, it's such a good practice. It's so good.
That's interesting.
And it was just phenomenal results, and particularly like growth and self-image results for me.
Yeah.
Of like quieting my mind and getting some outside noise quieted a little bit, so one, I can hear God a little bit better, but two, I can get a little bit farther away from those, what did you call them? Limiting beliefs. Yeah. Super helpful to let go of those limiting beliefs. Instead of like, oh, I got to kill these. I don't got to kill them. I just got to like let them go. And like almost get to a point of being like, oh, like, I thank you for being here. You know, like, that self-doubt. Like, oh, I can thank that self-doubt. I appreciate you trying, but I don't need you right now.
I don't know almost anything about it, so do your own due diligence before you try it. But I've tried it just in my own hillbilly logic. It was advised to me, and I tried it, and it kind of worked. It's called, I think, exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Okay. And the idea is that you just sit around that which would freak you out until you just are just like, I can't be scared about this anymore.
Yeah, totally.
And I wonder
in a safe, controlled environment.
Yes, yeah. And so I wonder if I think sometimes what you're saying, okay, as you're identifying that limiting belief or whatever it is, you could kill it, but a lot of times when you're trying to do that, it doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
We're just kind of like, yeah, you don't have the power over me.
Yeah.
This doesn't seem. The more I sit with you, the more untrue that voice is saying. It doesn't quite align with what I'm.
Absolutely.
seeing. My wife's smiling at me. Apparently, I'm not as bad a husband as I thought.
Right. Yeah.
Not everything isn't dead at the farm. Apparently, I'm a better farmer than I thought. It's interesting. So I want to keep digging, going down these, because I think we both have a tendency to go deep in the roots. But
totally.
Before we go, I got to go deeper one more time, and then we'll keep rolling down. Something I've been teasing out, this concept, and just throw it out for you and see what you think about it, is that. So do you ever read anything from C.S. Lewis?
Yeah.
He talks about this, the importance of words, and like the travesty of when you take words and you misuse them, you destroy them, and now you can no longer use that word to describe the world as it actually is, to actually speak truth, facts, right?
Okay.
And so I believe absolutely in the power of words, but I've realized that there is a difference between reality, and this isn't now about self-talk or emotion or anxiety. It's just the larger theme of what we're talking about that inspired me on it. There's reality, and then there's the words, and then there's words. And many times it takes a lot of words to you were an artist. I've never been that kind of artist, but it takes a lot of words to sketch out or etch out the outline of that truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like in our fast-paced culture, in our simplistic culture, in our tweet culture, people say a truth, but they're only saying a shade of the truth.
Totally.
It lacks nuance. It lacks depth. And to me, I think when I come out here, and I'm sure I'm romanticizing it like a bajillion %.
It's good.
But when I come out to the farm, and when we were here just for that first day, and we were talking to someone that's a craftsman, whether it's they're cultivating the earth or they're doing any kind of art form.
Sure.
Part of the beauty of it is that it's like it's time. It takes time, and I think that there are a lot of truths that we'll never understand if we don't take time. And so even when you're saying, like, I'm meditating on one word, to me, like, well, okay, that makes some sense, because there's the reality of silence takes time to, like, almost like a LiDAR scan, to scan this out and to really get what you mean. Or I forgive you, I forgive you. Is that's 3 words?
Yeah,
have more syllables. I'm terrible at syllables. I forgive you is 3 words, but the reality would take to really unpack it is a lot of words, a lot of time, and a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
And so I just think whenever I see someone, I know, hopefully we'll get into it, that's growing trees and thinking for the next couple hundred years, I'm like, that aligns a lot more with the way the world actually is and our fast-paced culture.
Yeah, that's a good tie. That's a good connection.
Any thoughts on that? Do you think like time
yeah,
and words and reality?
I mean, we talk about silence as a word.
Yeah.
I think there's the knowledge of a word, but then there's like the experience of it, of the reality, which maybe helps.
That's a good way of saying it.
Like there's silence. Oh, I know what that means. But then to experience silence gives you a different understanding of what the word actually entails, and then it carries more depth and more power, right?
Well said.
And so I think it's the same thing with like the I forgive you. Yeah, it's a little kitty cat. Like my wife and I practice something that she started doing when we first got married, which was saying the actual words, "Will you forgive me?" And the other person saying, "Yes, I forgive you."
Yeah.
Or no, I'm not ready to go there yet. And the crazy concept of actually saying those words is wild, because there's scenarios early on in our marriage where I hurt her feelings, get upset about silly stuff like a sponge in the sink and it's all dirty and grimy. I'm like, why would you leave it in the sink like that? Hose that thing out, give it a little rinsey rinse, scrub it out and put it on the side.
Maybe put a little soap on there to clean it
You're
off.
with me. But the way I presented the information was pretty hurtful and critical and not fun. And then she's upset and I'm like, well, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I'm like, I wanted us to be like doing this sink thing better, this sponge thing better. And she's like, that doesn't really matter. My feelings are hurt. I'm like, yeah, but they shouldn't be hurt because I didn't mean to hurt them.
Yeah.
And totally disqualifying her feelings and not knowing that. She's like, you know what? I'm like, this was not this simple of a conversation. It took like hours, right? But like getting to a place eventually of her saying, I need you to just ask for forgiveness so I can forgive you and let go.
Yeah.
And me being like, okay, fine. I can do that, but that is going to require me to admit that I hurt you or admit that what I did was hurtful.
Yeah.
And that was a huge blow to my pride, because I'm like, but that's wrong. You don't understand. You're not getting it.
Yep.
But the experience, hi, little kitty. Hi, little girl. Why don't you get out of here?
Is she a mouser or just a...
She tries her best to mouse. She
mouse.
kind of stinks at it. She gonna bother you?
No, she's okay.
The experience of saying those words, will you forgive me, is so different than saying, hey, I'm sorry that your feelings got hurt.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I didn't mean to do that. So different. So like that makes those words real, and that experience deepens the understanding. So, and then going through the words of, oh, I do forgive you, man, it's like everything gets broken open, and like everything, like our connection to each other, Hannah's and mine, just becomes real in that moment, because I've said, hey, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings.
Yep.
Will you forgive me? And like admitting that you are hurt. It's validating someone's experience, which is totally, a lot of people have talked about that, but validating someone's experience and then feeling validated helps you then open up and like let go.
Yeah.
Of something.
Yeah, it changes that crazy cycle.
Yes. So like the words, like the reality of that experience is so different than just like the words.
Yeah.
But it takes so much time to get through the actual experience.
Yeah, I think probably, I liked how you'd said it in the long way and in the summarized way. I think I really liked how you'd said it. Maybe you can remind me exactly what it was. But it was
You got it recorded. You're good.
Yeah, it was like the reality, and then there's the truth or the knowledge, and the knowledge of something and the experience of something, I think is how you said it. And that summarized well of the thing I'm trying to tease out, which is that someone can know about something, but they don't really know it until they've experienced it.
Yeah.
And I think that and I think time is part of that recipe.
Yeah.
And I think I'm trying. I think I'm hopefully succeeding to draw these abstract thoughts and tie it even just to what we're doing here what you're doing here at the farm.
Yeah.
And systems. I love simplicity, but the world is actually complex.
Well, can I tie something in further with this concept?
Sure.
People, I think, in society, like you're saying, they want, like, there's a reality they were trying to get to, and to help other people understand this reality, but we want it to be watered down to one word or like one simple thing to mean this big complex thing, and it just never does. That doesn't fit, right? I'll give you an example of like how that applies to the farm, because we want there to be like a solution to a big problem that's complex by one avenue. So if we're having a big fire blight problem with our chestnut trees, well, we want just the spray produced, the chemical that will stop the fire blight. But that is going to produce other problems.
Yep.
So there's not like a simple way to like get to a existence that doesn't involve pain, right? Or like some loss.
Yep.
And like, so we have 2,000 chestnut trees, and we'll plant probably 500 of them out here and sell the rest. But those 500 are not all going to make it. But if I was in this idea or this mindset that I think a lot of people walk into a farming situation with, especially in ignorance, like me. I want them all to make it. So I'm going to do whatever it takes and cut corners so they all make it. The fact is that the issue is much more complex than that. And some of them are going to die.
Yep.
Some of them are not going to make it, you know? And so how do I like allow there to be some loss and some pain and some suffering in a system, and also work towards health? And like the solution is many things.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing.
Yeah, I like it. So I think trying to draw that parallel, let's say farm to even just marriage, the farm, and from what I understand from theory and from what you're telling me, is, hey, it's going to be, there's a cycle that you want to create of health.
Totally.
But it's going to take more than one step. It's going to take time. There's going to be setbacks. And I think in a relationship, the same thing. There's a cycle and a momentum you want to build, but it's going to take time. There's going to take setbacks. And I think if you try to rush it, you'll definitely never achieve it. I think, success takes time, takes care, takes thought. It takes whatever those seeds are. I think in people, a lot of times it's words. In farming, it's
practice,
soil and microbiomes or whatever they're called. The little,
mycorrhizae, fungus,
the funguses, and I think I'm trying to get back to that, because my new fascination is I want, to me, wisdom and truth is understand the way the world actually works, not how I want it to work, how it actually works. And I think when we're out here, I think this is a big real world test of, does the world actually work this way? And you'll find out over time. Like, there's the premise, here's the experiment, now let's try, and how resilient was our system, and it's good. Okay, we're jumping out of the deep a little bit, back to kind of some practicals and curiosities and business stuff with farming.
Yeah.
Starting a business at any time takes guts, but starting a big project like this before you're 30 is like a whole other level. So,
ooh, yeah.
Well done. First off, seriously, that's inspiring. I'm 33, my wife's 30, so just a little bit older, but it's super encouraging to see other young people that are doing and are crafting and creating and taking risks. What advice would you give to someone else in their 20s and 30s looking, and not just farming, but to start something of their own? And then I kind of I can ask you this question a couple of ways, but finance tip, business tips, planning, recruiting. When I was out here, I noticed there's a lot of, I think, family and/or friends helping. You've done a lot to get it from idea and searching an online property list to a reality. And I think a lot of those things will apply to more than to a coffee shop, to a nonprofit, and to a farm. So what would be some advice for our young people? We're both young, but people maybe a little younger or our age but haven't started yet. What's some advice for getting from start to something real?
I mean, one concept is the willingness to fail.
Yep.
Like I feel like me, you get into analysis paralysis very easily, and then I just think and plan and never actually am willing to risk and fail. I want a plan that won't fail, which is just not what life is. So getting over that or practicing in small ways in your life, and finding areas that maybe are lower risk but still involve failure. To try something and then be willing to be wrong, be willing to fail, be willing to look foolish, right?
So first one, be willing to fail.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you can start with micro failures, smaller, less risky things.
Yeah, you don't need to go blow your life savings or your family's inheritance on a dumb idea.
That's good.
Because someone said you should.
Well, what else?
I think, who said this? I don't know who said this, so someone's going to get credit for it someday. But like discovering something that isn't just a good idea, but maybe something that the world needs, but that you're actually willing to suffer for, and like experience pain for. So like I could be in love with a hobby, but not be willing to like be uncomfortable for it. So we started on a little tiny plot over where we were living with farming, and discovered I'm actually willing to be uncomfortable and like have dirt under my fingernails and and get calluses and dry hands and like sweat, and that's okay with me. Like, it's uncomfortable and painful, but I'm okay with that. So finding something that is that way isn't just like a good idea.
Man, that's a lot of wisdom right there. So just find something you think the world needs, but also, and sometimes I'll see like a Venn diagram. People will help on this kind of thing. Like,
sure.
a lot of times I'll hear also that you also maybe are competent at.
Yeah. Well, and I would
But
change
that
that.
you're willing to suffer.
Not just
for.
that the world needs. Find something that your community needs.
Okay.
So that your town needs.
Is that important to you that it is close to you as possible?
It depends on the work. Depends on who you are. Some people are really gifted at traveling and seeing something in a global, giant fashion. I think that most people don't, and I think most people need small communities to support each other.
And that's in a good way, not a bad way. That's the echo chamber. That's the circle of inspiration. Oh, you're doing this. You're doing this.
This is missing, yeah.
And you're galvanizing one another so that
Totally.
you're partnering with.
Because then there's partnership opportunities.
Yes.
Easily, instead of like, and some people are super gifted at like total online work, remote work, and they're going to find connections that way from people who are thousands of miles away, and that's great for them. I just don't think that that's me. So
that's good.
What else? I think, like money is like a huge piece of any business passion endeavor. So there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of money who want to see people succeed. But they're usually looking for people who are super passionate.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're passionate about something and you have the willingness to try and fail, usually like things do happen. I think getting clammed up and being afraid a lot and getting stuck in fear usually stops you from like finding those people.
That's good.
So like, boy, but it's a huge journey. So you can only do what you can do, and you're only where you're at, and where you're at is enough. But like, boy, we feel like we fell into this situation a lot of the time. Like we were not planning on doing this so quickly. So for us, it was very much a, hey, are you willing to do this? And if the answer is yes, then there's the passion. Now go for it. For people getting started with farming or with a business endeavor, it might be the other way first. It might be the like, I am so passionate, I'm telling everyone I know about this idea because I care about it so much. And I think the huge thing missing in most of like people starting something new in a community setting or a business setting is they don't have elders telling them, hey, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you should lean into this, don't lean into that, asking good questions. So, and what I mean by elders, what I mean is parents, people who are at least 10 years older than you, giving you active input with what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. Like you're not an island, and no one is. You have to have these older generation people. So finding those people, going after them actively and saying, hey, I like the way your life looks and the way you are. Will you give me input actively is like so key. It's been key for us. It's been key for me. And I think helped skip a lot of failures along the way.
There's a lot of gold there.
Yeah.
Come on.
So many good things.
Partly I know that from my wife and I started before her, and then we started working together, which is a question coming up about working with your wife.
Oh yeah.
We've worked together since we were engaged, always since then. But so I think I started my first business at 22 or something.
How long have you guys been married?
10 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So 10 years, and we were dating for like 9-10 months before that. So we've been together about 11 years of relationship. But I think I started my first business at 22. But that fear to let other elders in was hugely limiting.
Yeah.
And that I didn't, coming from very blessed upbringing, but not like uber wealthy, the idea that people have money that they don't really know what to do with.
Yeah.
That they need to make between 6 and 12% passive, and it can be a part of portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite realize that there's a lot of that out there, and that they need someone to, if they can generate a right percentage, and then also people actually have substantial amounts of money just for passion. Just so, big dream for me in our early years was feature filmmaking.
Oh, cool.
And so learned the craft, and I wrote a screenplay, and that's as far as I got. And I'd listen to the indie filmmaker podcast, I think was one of them, and they talk about like, okay, just get 10 people to do $10,000 a piece and buy a tenth of your LLC, and you'll get $100,000, or get 100 and it'd be $1 million, and do your film. And I just thought, like, no one's gonna give me $10,000 for a film that's most likely not going to be profitable. But there was story after story of people doing it. And like, no, there are people that have $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million that are just like, there's no movie about fill in the blank community or with nerds like me. So if you'll make that, I'll give you I want to be a part of it. And I think that is gold for everyone listening, is let people in. Don't be afraid to fail. So you can start small. Yeah. Also, but going out and getting investment, going out, and buy in.
And, do whatever you want to do. I think, like, there's a really cool thing to be said for trying to find a private loan, private investment situations, because people can like feel your passion in a room. They can see it, they can sense it when you have it. And it's not, and I'm not talking about being on all the time and like presenting to people all the time. I'm talking about being connected to who you are with what you want to do.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, to your point, I think there's opportunity out there, and you just don't always know where it is, but it will usually come to you.
And that's highly practical. That we think from movies, you just go to the bank.
Yeah.
But it's people, and even venture capital, which I've never gone and pursued, but I've thought about it more and more. And we're actually really close where we live. We're within 6 hours of Silicon Valley, or something like that, to San Jose. It's still people. It's still. Yeah. I've heard stories now, people just like on LinkedIn messaging like the CEO of a major company, and they respond, and you're just like, you think it's impossible. You think, and it's not. And so hopefully people will be encouraged and galvanized to do. I want to jump to the next question, unless there's any other just specific tips on starting a business from your journey.
Partnership is huge. Like my wife and I work super well together. I don't know why, but we do.
And that's the next question. How is it working with your wife? How's that been for the business?
Absolutely essential.
That's awesome.
Not everyone's gonna have like the marital partner that like mirrors perfectly, and there's things that Hannah does that drives me crazy, and vice versa. But I think the bottom line for us is that we established early on with the farm plans that we both wanted the same end goal. The way we got there is what we fight about all the time. Mm-hmm. We have arguments almost every day about how something should be done.
So you're married on the mission, but not on the method.
The method is always up in the air. She's so detailed. She wants everything looking beautiful and like done exquisitely. I'm like, let's just get it done, and like, who cares how it looks? And like super practical, and she's like super beautiful with things. And vice versa. Sometimes I'm like, this is not done well. And she's like, it's good enough. But it's always like the method that we disagree on. But I think what's been really essential for us is that we both really know that we want the same end goal. So like the arguments are totally worth getting through, or letting go, or hurting someone's feelings and asking for forgiveness. Yeah. That happens a lot. But it's worth it because we're like, well, we're both care about this end goal being the same. I think what would be really hard is if you're in a partnership, or if you're married and the business you're wanting to do together doesn't have that same end goal. Then do a different business, or like that's or do a different partner to help with that business. Because I think would be super hard. Well, what's it been like with you and your wife working together?
My wife told someone recently that we've never met, and I think it's probably true, that we've never met quite our personality combo in a couple.
Sure.
So,
what do you mean by that?
Well, twofold. So it's been highly contentious the entire 10 years. And it's just an interesting combo. She's a 1, I'm a 5 on the Enneagram. She's very, very practical, and pretty like deep and smart and creative, but also like it's pretty simple pleasures. Like she does, going shopping for 2 hours would be a blast, and just hanging out and having coffee. And I'm always wanting to be like, let's talk about the deepest part of life. And so podcast is helpful for that.
Nice.
And then I'm very, so if she gets 10 things done a day, I get like one thing done in a day. It's kind of hot and cold, or however you want to call that. So us has been a journey of, it's been a lot of contention, but really the same as you guys, not the same as you guys, but in the sense that mission has always been the same. Mm-hmm. But when I was preparing to ask her, we call it courting, to court her, very, very, very old fashioned, or date her. She had a blog, and I remember reading her blog, and she was the life she wanted, and she wrote in that blog was the exact life I wanted. So we've always held really high values for like class and excellence and generosity. Mm-hmm. And so we love the same things, but we approach them in very different ways. So in immaturity and in our first years, there was just so much frustration with method. And then as we've gone more and more, I believe that she is the embodiment of the goodness of God in my life. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is like there's salvation is my greatest blessing, but in terms of any other blessing on earth, like it really is her. And many times I'm like, I really feel like I was led to her because I might have overlooked it, or I might have got frustrated by this. And only I get healthier and she gets healthier, are we like, that fits in a way for the next 50 years of our marriage that I could not have asked for a better fit. Yeah. But when you're immature, you don't even see it at all. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of been our dynamic. So we love it. Now, what we've kind of learned to make it work is to kind of like, she'll take step, divide and conquer. If we're right over top of each other, we're frustrating each other. Sure. Because I'm like, let's take I open loops constantly. What if? Oh, and she says, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? She's a 1 too. Yeah. So that frustrates her. So instead, I've learned, okay, I got to think, open up, ask a lot of people, nerd out about this.
You're like future oriented, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And big picture and 20 years down the road. But I wouldn't even get out of my front door without her. And so then she's learned to appreciate that it takes us places she would never lead us. Yeah. But I've come to appreciate that I'd never get there without her.
Totally. That's nice.
Kind of been
That's a nice mixture.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Any other challenges or things you've learned working with your wife, living on the farm, being here? Have there been like that, like practices or habits, or hey, we're off work now kind of things?
So I think both of us in our own ways get testy with each other, or not with each other, with life. Yeah. And we need a break. And so when you are around each other all the time, we do a lot of projects together, and it works really well most of the time. But there's I'll get so grumpy for no reason. And the reason is I haven't had any alone time. I've been by myself in a while. Yeah. And she'll be like, you're kind of grumpy. Go be alone. Go take a book and go to the coffee shop and just be alone for an hour and a half. Yeah. And it recharges me so well. And she gets just down and sad and emotion or a creative constipation, really. She needs to make something or do something fun and creative. And she just will neglect that because there's so many practical things to do on the farm that it gets pushed to the back burner all the time. Yep. So knowing each other's little vices like that has been really helpful, I think, because then you can give someone permission to hey, it's okay to be upset or sad. You don't need to, I don't need to fix it. And it's okay to be there. And you should go do something fun. Yep. That's giving each other permission to be upset has been super helpful. Or hey, you're in a crabby mood. It's okay to be in a crabby mood. You can be grumpy. That's okay. Go take a book and go be grumpy. Yep. Was helpful for me because I'm oh, I'm grumpy, and it's okay if I'm grumpy. Okay, I don't need to be so grumpy. It just helps. It loosens, it greases the wheels so much. Yep. So knowing the vices and then knowing that there's little recharge things that we each need, and then giving someone permission to go do that thing. Because I'll jump into fix it mode and I'll be oh, let me fix your problem for you, and that's not really helpful. Or she'll be telling me how I feel, and that's not really helpful. So yeah, I think that's the advice, is like get to know the vices, or like specifically working with your partner, your spouse.
That was great advice right there. But if you have more on that whole topic,
make sure you like do work well together before you sink a bunch of money and time into a project.
so
Like
maybe
do a
smaller
trial.
project. Yeah.
Because like there's one thing is just having like, oh, we have problems we need to work through in working together. Another thing is like we do not work well together. Like, and that's okay. Not everyone has to be like a perfect couple working together on projects, perfect match. We liked being around each other so much all the time. First, 2 years of marriage, 3, 4, or 5 years of marriage now. Like, we still like being around each other so much. And that's like, I'm not to say that like, oh, not everyone has that. Like, but like sometimes you need space, and like, I don't know, there's ways to make a business work and like an endeavor work, or a family unit work. We don't have kids, so I can't really speak to that. But
Yeah.
Like, have you heard of John Mark McMillan? I'm sure you've heard of that guy. Artist.
No, I actually haven't.
No way. Okay. He's written a ton of very popular Christian songs. But he has this one live album where he does like some little talks, and one of the talks he does, he says like, there's a difference between novelty and intimacy. And like in a marriage, it's really exciting to be like, the novelty of marriage is so exciting. And like he's talking about songs, and like most songs are written about novelty of love. And it's very exciting and new and fresh and stimulating. And then there's intimacy. And the problem with intimacy is what he says, is that it's hard and it takes work and time. But the thing is, intimacy is way better than novelty. But to get there, you have to, like, he's talking about his favorite song, and it's like tougher than the rest or whatever. But to get to intimacy from novelty is like this really hard journey. It's really tough, and get through it. I think about that by being married all the time. Of like, there's novel moments that do come up as I've been married longer. But like the novelty of marriage and love is like, that was the first couple of years. It was novel, and now it's turning into intimacy in a deeper level. And I think it's going to keep getting deeper for years and years, like you guys.
I agree with that. And I think that's been my, only one wife, one life, whatever. So I've only been married once. But that was my experience, is when you're working together. So I think probably the warning, and I don't think it will be this way for everybody, but it kind of like blew the novelty out faster. It's
totally. I totally agree.
Dusted that off.
Absolutely.
And so I think sometimes I go, man, I think we could have I could have nursed like my ego. That honestly, that was the first. My ego died so early in our relationship because she saw the worst part of me so soon.
Oh yeah.
So she saw we weren't making a bunch of money in our business. Didn't know what to do to lead it, and she saw that right up front. And I think the downside, or if I mourn anything, is that really fast the knight in shining armor showed his cracks in the armor. On the flip side, that's going to happen eventually. And on the opposite side, there's actually you and actually her. And to me, now the things that hold our marriage together and make it all but invincible, one of them is just this deep, deep respect. And so I think to me, respect is more one of the things that comes with intimacy.
Sure.
Respect based on experience versus just,
idealize.
Potential. Oh, they're probably amazing. They probably walk on water. It's like, no, I know they don't walk on water, but I see how he unravels that mistake. I see how he says, "I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?" I see, or how she does that. So I think you trade. So in my experience, if you work together, you probably get past the honeymoon phase faster.
Yeah, totally.
But the other side is going to come eventually, or if it doesn't, you're going to blow up probably as a marriage. So you want it to come.
Totally.
You want real
roots. Get it out.
And then I think it gets better every year.
Yeah, which is incredible.
And that's a blessing. Okay, let's see. So a little bit more on kind of the economics of farming. Can you reasonably make a living farming?
Well, sure. You just got to change your expectations.
Okay, so
Like,
unpack that.
like, I think this comes back into the whole like convenience thing. Like, well, what kind of life do you want to live? Like, do you want a new car? Do you want a house? I'm sorry, a big fancy house. Do you want to like sleep in every day? Do you want a college fund for your kids? Like,
Yeah.
most people would say yes to most of those things. And like, farming does not guarantee just about any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're, there's a lot of practical details. But again, we're in a little different situation than people who are having to take out a loan. Like, we're having financial investment from my wife's family.
Yeah.
Like, that's a little different, but it carries different pressure.
Yep. 100%.
Because not only it's not just about us. It's like, well, we're talking about like legacy and family that we could squander a bunch of money away.
Yeah.
And that could really suck. But like, what was I saying?
Talking about changing your expectations.
Oh yeah. Like, we're building investment into this soil out here, right? So I'm probably not going to have, I don't know, who knows? But like, we're not building for a college fund for our kids. We're building so that they have super, super healthy, rich trees and super, super healthy, rich soil that they could grow anything they want to easily.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're growing investment into. Making a living, though, is that what the question was? Make a living?
Yeah.
Earn a living? Hard to say, Like, people, like, the standard also just changes. Like, I don't know where the poverty line is right now.
So I guess probably like a and without jumping into details of what's going on right now for you that you don't want to jump into, when I think, one of our interns got a job at one of the burger places in town, and it's pretty cool, actually paying him pretty good, but it's $19 an hour. So let's say it was $20 an hour, which is pretty amazing that you can make that work in a restaurant.
Yeah.
If you make, but that's, I think $20 an hour, 40 hours a week works out to $3,200 a month, which I feel is a real income.
Yeah.
Like that's like a full-time job. So you can go way higher, but if you and your spouse are doing that, or then one or both people, then you can, in Medford, my experience, you can make that work.
Yeah.
Could somebody say, hey, could somebody make that much farming, and like what would that take?
Depends on how long it takes. So we are a year and a half into actively working the land. And I'm going to again throw some numbers out that could be totally wrong, but I think that if someone's going to buy like a 10-acre farm and start farming it, annual crop or otherwise, they're going to have to get, I don't know, probably $400,000 to come up with.
To buy the land and put your first crop in.
Get your crop, get your equipment, get your animals, whatever you want to do. It's a lot of money in. We're doing it a little differently, right? So we made a little bit of money from the pumpkin patch and doing stuff like that. We have a lot of trees to sell. We're still in the phase of and most farmers don't start paying that back for a couple of years because it takes so long.
Yep. So the cycle to build it is that's good to know. So might take a few years. Once you get it going, is it reasonable? Like once the system's healthy.
Every farmer's different. It's so hard to say. Can't do a blanket term like that. I don't know. I think that
Is that your goal? Would your goal be that both of you could be able to make at least what you could make doing an entry job?
I think that our farm needs about $60,000 a year for us to get paid and to pay for everything on the farm.
Okay.
That would give us about $30,000 a year living wage.
Yep. But your rent is basically
there's
much,
other, but the farm expenses, there's like irrigation cost.
But I mean, what you're living off of, it's going to be less than some people might be able to do.
It's totally going to be less
because you can be on the property.
We're on a trailer. We're not paying a mortgage.
Yeah.
We're not again, that's because we're okay with that for now while we build a tiny house and work towards that.
Yep.
If your standard is higher, your debt and income has to be higher. right?
So you think sustainability for you to keep the lifestyle is 60?
At minimum.
Yep.
The years to reach that for us is probably going to be 3 or 4 years to get there.
Yep.
So like this year, if we sell a bunch of trees, we could make another maybe $9,000 or $10,000. So that's after a year and a half, gross of like 22,000 or something.
Yeah.
But that's also like, it's so hard to gauge because how much have we put in? You know, we put in a ton of money for the pumpkin patch. We also built a barn this year, you know, and that was $105,000. So, like, what's your expectation?
In the community, is there like at like this size of farm?
Yeah.
Is there a standard like ROI? And do they look at that way? Like if an investor did come in, they're like, hey, over these many years, you're going to put in X amount. You're going to put in $2 million, and you need to be making.
Yeah.
So
It totally happens on big scales, especially if you look at like the hemp farmers and stuff. They're dealing with that kind of cash.
But even on but something like this for other ones in that community, is there a standard of like, hey, you're doing good if you reach that ROI over 5 years? Or
Again, I'm the wrong person to ask. I don't know. What I do know is that there are some big needs in the community that are always going to be there. Like people are always going to need eggs.
Yep.
And if you bought like we're going to get up to 500 egg chickens pretty soon here. So let's use a little math real quick. That's like 400 eggs a day from 500 birds.
That's wild.
Ish. So that is 2,800 eggs a week.
How many?
2,800 eggs a week. I'll do into dozens in a second here. Times 4 for a month divided by 12. So that's 933 dozen a week. Or month, sorry. If you sold those for $5 a piece, that's $4,666. You got to factor in some upfront costs for the birds, for the coop, for your space, for the netting, and then you got to work out cartons and transportation and cleaning and stuff like that. But still, that's $4,500 a month.
And as you get further in that, will you break that down and be like, okay, like you'll know what the cost is per 12 pack of like the little carton and your feed? Will you break it down by like eventually will you get to that spot where you know per dozen what your cost is?
Yeah, totally.
What is? Yeah.
Especially if we start plugging in more things into the system to reduce feed costs, like getting food scraps dropped off. That reduces feed costs.
Yep.
Letting chickens free range instead of in coops all the time. That reduces feed costs. All kinds of stuff, you know, because we could live off of just the chickens for our personal income, and then everything else.
You can get all the protein you want.
Exactly.
You're going to be ripped. I'm going to be
exactly
shriveling over here. And
yeah, at like 20 cents a carton, and then like if we can sell them all out of the farm stand or do a couple accounts in town, and then we're only shipping minimally, we're just driving to 2 different places.
Yep.
And get some wholesale accounts and sell eggs at a couple dollars less than the store is selling them for a better dozen eggs.
Yep.
So the numbers are totally there. Like, it's just building a system that works, you know.
Which is, obviously, I think there's different ways to go about it. You can start with, here's my number, here's my goal, and build backwards. Or, but you're a good company. I'm reading the biography of Elon Musk right now, and they say Elon, his biographer, Walter Isaacson, I don't know, I think he's quoting someone else, said that Elon picks a problem, and then he figures out how to monetize it. And honestly, that doesn't sound like good advice, like business-wise. But
with a system, it makes sense.
But it's worked for him, and it can work. Like it's probably the way of the crusader, the idealistic person, the one that's not needing that's willing to risk it and say, hey, I'm going to do what's right first, and then we'll figure it out. And that's obviously worked for him. And it sounds kind of like what you're doing a little bit. Like, hey, here's this set of values. Here's an opportunity. Yeah. Here's the partners. There's a willingness. There's a yes. There's a joy.
There's a desire for the product.
Yep. Yeah. So now there's a long-term trend. People are going to need food. People are going to need. Okay. And we're going to let's do it right.
Yeah.
There's another quote that hopefully will encourage you. Chick-fil-A, when they were growing, apparently there was another. I think it was like Boston ham or some some other company was nearing $1 billion in sales. And the Chick-fil-A, so the story goes, Chick-fil-A board was all in a frenzy, like, we got to grow fast to compete with them. And the head of, I think it was Truett Cathy, as the story goes, hits the table. And he says, if we get better, people will demand we get bigger. And it was this idea of, which it's kind of like a faith step. It's a premise.
Totally.
Is if we focus on quality, demand will come.
Yeah.
And I think you have to sometimes you have to hedge that. You have to, I think, balance that principle. But once again, it worked for Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
They're focused on quality. I think the other company might be out of business and they're just thriving. Then the growth will come. And so and it sounds like what we're doing here. It's like if we do the right agriculture, permaculture, if we have where it's feeding
local loops, make closed loops.
Yep.
On our whole food cycle, on our waste cycle, everything.
Then over a long time, and then obviously the value of the land will appreciate too.
Absolutely.
So in terms of an investment, there could come a liquidation day someday, or you buy a bigger farm, or you farm Mars, or whatever you want to do.
How dare you say we'd ever sell this place?
Yeah, never.
I mean, it is a little bit of a tricky subject because, like, I think there's a piece of farming where people think it's not capitalism. It shouldn't be. It should be a different type of economics. It should be health economics.
That's what you believe?
That's what I believe.
Okay.
Because if we're talking about capitalism, then who cares about the health of this land? I'm going to get what I can out of it and then grow.
Yeah.
My business. I'm not trying to grow my business.
Yep.
I'm trying to grow the extra gravy of this land, right? Because that's where the profit's going to be for me.
I have a premise that's partially a hope and a prayer. I have to validate it in step that they're not that you don't have to choose. That's my premise, is that you can make that you can do economically self-sustaining things and not cut corners, and that generally speaking, that there's a way to get the market to reward you for quality.
How about customers that you know?
What was that?
Customers that you actually know. That's probably going to be a huge route to get there. Like if your clients know who you are, and customers know who you are, then you have a relationship with them. Like that's sustainability to me.
Yeah.
Not just like, oh, I can count on this product for my farm every week. I can count on my customers that they know who I am.
Yep. Relational resiliency.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think on that? And maybe you're like, I don't know if I buy it. But that premise that you can, if it's your goal and you're willing to have the pain for it, that there is a way to both produce a quality that would stand up to any level of integrity reviewed, but be economically sustainable and generate extra wealth.
Well, I think it absolutely is doable. My qualm is with people who, the concept of like growing for growth's sake. There's no, like, have you ever seen a business choose to stop growing because they thought, we're getting a little out of hand with like our profits. We don't really know where they're going. And like, we're kind of losing our customer base a little bit. Let's not grow that at another store. Let's actually stay at this level with this number of employees because we think that would actually be better for our values.
Yep.
I'm sure it happens. It's so rare.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's like the concept where it shouldn't cost to do it the right way.
Yep.
But it's going to, I think back to the beginning is like, you can't do everything at once. You can't tackle all the moral like quandaries at the same time. You can do one at a time.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think in terms of that question, have I seen it? What I have seen is big companies that will divest they'll like do a big sell-off, and you'll see on the stock report or whatever, the idea that, hey, we got out of our core competency, and they'll do it. They're doing it because they believe it will lead to more profit. But they're in the end, they're doing kind of the same. It would look similar. They're not doing it because necessarily of just an altruistic reason, but they recognize that's a whole interesting concept I'm fascinated with. I've coined it. Someone else probably coined it better. Basically, self-limiting mechanisms. You would think that big companies would just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but there's like a limit of focus, and their bigness trips them up, and the empire goes no larger. Yeah. And so that's an interesting concept. So I've seen them like divest. We're going to sell that asset. We're going to focus back on our core thing. We're going to double down. But to your point, I think what you're saying is a lot of times businesses, they do grow past their useful, and they actually they start to be a little bit self-limiting, disruptive in a bad way, not as healthy as they could if they had slowed down. Is that what you're saying?
Totally. Or just I see a value on that kind of concept, particularly for farming, where like I can't even imagine ever selling this land.
Yeah.
Because why would I? I'm like in love with this place.
Yes.
You know? And like that matters more to me than how much it's worth, even if I could buy a bigger piece of land that has better soil and better trees and make a profit off of this and buy that. Like, that wouldn't matter to me.
Yeah.
You know? And I think like that's that feels like richer, and that feels like a better way to see the value of this earth and like that we're sitting on, of like it all has so much more value to me because I know it.
I think that's so good. I suspect that belief, I tend towards the opposite, and I know that that let's go bigger, let's go further, let's expand, has a dark side, has a cost. I suspect that holding on tightly to something might also have a dark side and a cost too. And so I think it's just the idea of counting it and choosing it, and if you're good with it, then it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. But I definitely see a lot of beauty, because we definitely live in a world where everyone's trading out for the newest, the latest.
It's trading, and there's a Wendell Berry quote about like he's like the quality of care for the land will go down in a corresponding way with the amount of land you're managing. So like the more acres you have, the lower the quality is going to be on those acres for management for a single person.
Yep.
Right. And you could get a team, and you could get all these kinds of people who like could manage it really well, but the quality is still not going to be the same as it was if you were just managing one patch. And so I think that there's like a hunger and almost like a lust for more and more and more that I kind of want to combat a little bit.
It's good.
Where I'm like, to what end? Like, to what end? And I think there's a type of lifestyle that farming grants that's very satisfied with less, that we're, again, towing the line of, like how much is enough. But that is just very satisfying to have less. And we're on 100 acres. That's not less,
Yeah.
So we're trying to balance. Okay, what do we do with 100 acres?
I think I've seen on Pinterest or on Facebook for like a diagram of a half acre for safe. I think it was either half acre or an acre, where people will diagram it for self-sustaining for your family.
Yeah,
Is
I've seen that.
Accurate?
Mm-hmm.
So someone would be like, "You're 100x for your own family."
Yeah.
And then, which there's no real there's no point to that. Just it's interesting. And then someone else might go. So you talk to the person with 1,000.
Yeah.
And there's probably a little relativeness to it.
Yeah.
It's what you said there is fascinating, and something I'm struggling, there's no struggle really. It's just I'm toying with that concept. I'm with you on. I think if you can do things in a more organic, human, how the world actually is meant to work way, it's always better. So if you can produce the product, if you can produce the produce, if you can, in a way that is more healthy than not, more constructive than destructive, that's better. So as general premise, I think everyone would kind of agree with that. Less pollution, not more, all of that. But how to actually do that in reality, and so is interesting. And the idea of, so one idea I had is, because we have a lot of dreams for different businesses. And on one hand, you could have one mega business where a manager manages 5 different totally end products. And like the CEO is the head of like the restaurant company, the video company.
You mean Magnolia?
Yeah, they'd be big, and I think you do. There's benefits to that, which is okay. You're employing people, you're getting it out. There's the benefits, but on the flip side, I do think that principle of that you said, the more acres, the less quality per one person. It's going to probably play out.
Yeah.
So trying to think, how could you have on the flip side? I love the economy of scale. And my love is to see I would love to become big to empower the little guy.
Yeah.
I love seeing when it doesn't happen too often, when a giant becomes a giant, to empower the little not giants. Yeah, I mean, where that's the idea of a co-op, right? That's the idea of a cooperative. Is together we're really big. We have power, we have scale, we have efficiency, but we're not using it to hurt people. We're using it actually to empower the next guy up.
Yeah.
So I was just toying with that, how you might do businesses, or maybe instead of that, where like everyone's kind of mixing, you have a lot of siloed off businesses where these 10 people actually don't coordinate with the other 10 in the other business. All they do is wood tables, or all they do is, and I think that focus is at least idealistically attractive.
Yeah.
How it would work on the efficiency, and can it compete in the market? Can it get people what they want at the price they want? Can it be sustainable? Can you pay people a job? Those are the questions,
Yeah. Well, I think you struggle with a management situation like that only because, like, you might be gifted to manage managers, but, like, you can't do those 5 things, like, because you're probably not good at all 5 of those things.
Yep.
Like, there's probably someone else who, like, is going to kill it at that one skill. So even as a farmer, like, I'm not going to get into probably growing corn, even if I might use corn as a supplement for part of my chicken feed. But someone else is going to do so much better at it than I am.
Yep.
And then, so they're going to grow corn, and I'm going to trade them chestnuts for their corn.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And let them do their thing really well that I don't need to also do. But on the other hand, like, as a farmer, I have to be a little bit good at everything, which sucks because I'm like, I don't have time to get good at everything, to be an expert at everything.
That's where reading that Elon Musk book is kind of, it's making me think a lot about that, because there are, like, similar things in spirit that are very different in practice. Like the idea of, like, the craftsman who does it all.
Yeah.
Seems they're very focused, and that's very organic, and he did everything, he touched everything, he saw everything. But we know that actually falls short. You have to cooperate. That if you don't specialize and bring the complexity of partners, you won't actually have as good of an end product.
Totally.
So it's this interesting thing where you're like, these feel like opposites, but they actually align.
Yeah.
And that I would confuse myself even trying to explain it, but it's interesting. Let's keep trudging on, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Not trudging, running with joy, enjoying it. We're kind of wrapping towards the end, but we can take as long on these final questions as you want.
Sure.
As a husband, a farmer, a business person, a lover of quality shoes.
Yeah.
Most importantly.
Oh yeah.
And these are big questions. What scares you most about the direction of society right now? And then the second question, same, but what excites you most about society right now? Because I think it's a two-sided coin.
I mean, I'll have a different answer every day of the week, right? But
So
today, I think what scares me most is a loss of love for things. I think is, and then maybe that ties into people being disconnected from themselves, but just like, there's such a disconnect from like plants and nature a lot for people and for me, that getting into farming, I've reconnected with a lot of it and still don't know a thing about it. And realizing, there's so much love here that I wasn't able to access. So seeing people so disconnected from nature and their food and how those two mingle together, it feels like there's a huge loss of love, where there's a lot of causes that people get behind for things. And it's like easy to fight for a cause. It's hard to like be in love with something. And then so I think maybe that scares me.
So you just see a lot of people that they're protesting, they're frustrated, they're driven by more shallow things. But when you ask them or you inquire and you look at them and you go, are you really in love?
Are you in love with anything about life?
Yeah.
And what are you in love with about life?
And the
like,
lack
if
of
no
that's
answer.
Kind of scaring you.
Yeah. It's like, well, there's got to be things.
It's good.
And then maybe what excites me the most is maybe a resurgence of people caring more about local stuff. I know it's a little tinsy answer, but like, it's kind of a cool concept. Like the excitement of like, this was made in town. Like, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And that used to be such a basic thing 100 years ago. Like, yeah, of course it was made in town. Where else would it be made? And now it's like everything was outsourced, and now things are coming back to like a excitement for locally made products. And
I like that.
Grown goods is really fun to think about.
Something excites me is, and hopefully this comes out right, it's a backwards compliment. Based on the fears and things I heard, because I'm just a little bit older and a millennial, and I think in a previous conversation, you're like right at the edge of Z and
Sure.
millennial. But you shouldn't exist. your wife shouldn't exist. And what I mean by that is, like Gen Z seems doesn't seem to, they do really care, but they cover it with a lot of flippancy. And like older people would have said about millennials and then definitely about Gen Z that we're just this crazy generation that's going to burn the world down.
Totally.
Which every generation thinks that about the other generation, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's exciting to realize that, like, so the headlines you hear, I've heard for many years now, is people can't pay attention, people don't like anything long form, everybody is just shallow.
Mm-hmm.
The stats say that, I think it's a vast majority, like 40% of all young people, their ambition in life is to be famous. But here you and your wife are loving something, sacrificing for something, slowing down. And that excites me. It's that the headlines aren't always true. They don't reflect everybody.
Totally.
And there's the Pareto principle, 80-20, that at least probably 20% of the population is going to do it right and produce a lot of virtue in our world. You know? So I thank you for doing that.
Oh,
and it's cool.
Stop it.
Okay, final 2 questions. What are you most curious about right now? And then one more question.
I'm curious, golly. I think I'm really curious about if some of our systems are going to work.
On the farm.
Yeah, some of our experiments. We buried a lot of logs to see if they will work as sponges for water retention for our trees in the summer. I don't know if it's going to work. I have some research that says it will work. I'm really curious to see if it will work. Like, I'm really curious about the next 4 years, because that will be telling if some of these concepts will withstand the next 40 years. And I just can't make it go any faster.
You have to watch and wait and see.
Just watch and wait and see. Totally.
But I'd be remiss to not mention this before we get off. I remember when we met, the only other time we really got to talk, you talked about, I think it was chestnut or hazelnut, one of the trees that will live for a very long time.
400 or 500 years.
And that you're planting some of those.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's one of the things with, like, I'm not going to live long enough to see those trees come to their full potential, but my kids totally will. My grandkids totally could.
Yep.
If they choose to keep on with this idea, with this concept we're setting up. So it's fun to think about planting trees that will outlive your grandkids, you know?
Yeah.
And produce enough food to feed everyone, you know? So we're at this baby beginning stage of just trying to get things prepped for the next 30 years and trying to prove some of these theories that they do work and that they are sustainable, and that they will reduce our water usage, and they will suck carbon out of the atmosphere, and they will produce a lot of food, enough to change out some food cycle stuff. And yeah, it's a cool tree. We'll see if it works.
Yeah. Oh, it's very, very cool. And I think I hope that everyone listening, that we all kind of do that. That I know for me, even with this podcast, and my world is basically learning, talking, writing, teaching. It's where what has kind of been what I want it to be. And I kind of decided more or less that truth, wisdom, education will probably be the biggest thing I'll pass on to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it will be safe so they can go do some kind of education, or we lead a school, so maybe they'll go there.
Yeah.
But also just these podcasts and the books I might write.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you can't give everything to your kids. Like, you can't. There's going to be more that they need, and they won't. Maybe in the end they won't. I hope they will. I hope your kids will, in some way or another, want to engage and appreciate the farm. I hope my kids will, in some way or another, engage and want to. And they can cultivate that. We'll want to engage in the wisdom and the values that we have, and we're going to do our best to cultivate that. But that's all you really can do is say, I'm going to give you what I can give you. It won't be everything. It won't be this, and all the rest. But I think if everybody did that, if everybody just said, what is one thing that would last 100 years that I can give the world? If 8 billion people did that.
Dude, like, how do you think 7 generations ahead? That's another concept that Don Hammond, the old logging boss, talked about, was like, we have to start planning 7 generations down the road.
Yep. Because
that will help shape what we do now. It will help make this year matter a little bit less and a little bit more.
At the same time.
Yeah. But absolutely essential way of thinking that needs to change.
That's cool. Final question. what is your personal favorite question and why? What's the one that works for you?
From this set of questions you asked?
No, just
oh,
that
no,
you,
just
that you
question.
ask yourself or you ask other people.
There's a couple good ones. One is like, I love talking about like, well, what are you falling in love with these days? Which is a very deep, heavy question.
Yeah. It's like I'd ask my wife, what are you falling in love with these days?
I know. She's like, who cares, dude?
Like,
go to bed.
Bake something and have fun.
Yeah. But I also love asking like, have you failed at anything recently? And like, what'd you fail at? And like, just trying to make it more okay with like failing and making it less of like a downer bummer, you suck, or like, oh, I learned the right thing about life, and more just like yeah, I blew it, goofed there.
Yeah.
And like that's a nice concept to talk about too, you know.
Two great ones. Let me repeat them so I can remember them. One is, what are you falling in love with?
Mm-hmm.
Or what do you? Yeah, and then the other is, hey, in a light way, in a way to make it actually like a positive.
Totally.
What have you failed at recently?
Yeah.
What'd you learn from it?
What'd you try? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, hey, we're going to wrap up this podcast. Been just so much. Hopefully we can apply and hopefully you just enjoyed listening, or if you're watching with us, watching and listening, please come if you're in the Rogue Valley area to Evers Ridge Farm.
Oh yeah, come on by.
When they have you can check on the website when there's public opportunities.
Yes, yeah, the website will be updated hopefully soon.
Good.
But it's up.
And you can follow them on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's at Evers Ridge Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's be a good follow. And thank you so much just for being here with me and with everyone that's listening. And I hope that we all and I think we got inspired, and hopefully we'll get out there and do something that's going to last for 100 years or 7 generations.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Easy, right? Plant a tree.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it, man.
See you guys.
I'm so thankful for that conversation with Thomas Petersen. If you'd like to learn more or follow up with everything that he and his wife are doing over at Evers Ridge Farm, you can go to eversridgefarm.com. That's their website. You can see what upcoming events are happening. And you can also follow up with them, even if you're not in the area, on Instagram at Evers Ridge Farm, and just see the cool and creative things that they're doing over there. Just want to remind you to rate and review the show wherever you're listening and watching. Incredibly helpful. And then finally, want to keep adding value and hanging out with you on a weekly basis as we send out this podcast on a kind of a bi-weekly basis. And so you can subscribe to The Wise Letter at thewiseletter.com or in a link wherever you're watching or listening. And we're going to focus on helping you grow healthier, wealthier, or wise. Is that okay? I think you'll enjoy growing in all those areas. It's a free newsletter sent out every Thursday. And with that, thank you for tuning in. Great having another conversation and kind of being a part of this community with you. Have a wonderful day.